In the spring of 1212, in the mountains southeast of Kyoto, an old monk sat in a hut 10 feet square, everything he owned in the world. He had been born into wealth and rank, heir to one of the oldest shrines in Japan. And then he watched the world end. Not once, 5 times. A firestorm that ate a third of the capital. A tornado. The capital itself abandoned. A famine that killed 42,000 people in 2 months. And an earthquake that shook the mountains apart. In that 10-foot hut, he began to write. The first sentence he set down is now the most famous opening in Japanese literature. This is the story of Kamo no Chomei, the man who watched the world end and built a smaller one. His name was Kamo no Chomei, born around 1155, the son of the head priest of the Shimogamo Shrine. Understand what that meant. Shimogamo was one of the oldest and most powerful shrines in Japan, the spiritual guardian of the capital itself, set in a sacred forest so ancient that it still stands in Kyoto today. Its head priesthood was wealth, rank, and honor, and Chomei was raised to inherit it. The boy had gifts. He studied the biwa lute under a courtmaster. His poetry was good enough to be noticed at the palace. Then, while he was still a teenager, his father died. And the succession, the future he had been raised for, slipped away to other men. Chomei did what talented, disappointed men have always done. He threw himself into his art, poetry contests, music, years of quiet, stubborn work, and the work paid off, in a way that would decide the rest of his life. But while Chomei practiced his art, the world around him began to die. 1177. On a windy night, a fire broke out in a dancer's lodging house and rode the gale through the capital. By morning, a third of Kyoto was ash, palace gates, government halls, the houses of the great. 1180. A tornado, almost unheard of in Kyoto, tore a path through the city, flattening entire blocks. That same year, the military ruler, Terra no Kiyomori, simply abandoned the capital, dragging the court to a new city by the sea. Houses that had stood for generations were dismantled and floated down the river. Within months the move failed, and everyone trudged back to a half-ruined home. Then came the worst. 1181. The harvests failed, twice. Famine filled the capital with the starving. Parents gave what food they had to their children and died first. A monk walked the streets writing the sacred letter A on the forehead of every corpse he passed as a final blessing. In 2 months, he wrote it 42,300 times. And in 1185, the earth itself gave way. A great earthquake that split mountains and toppled what remained. Chomei saw all of it, and he wrote it all down, precise, unflinching, like a war reporter 800 years early. Through it all, Chomei kept writing, and at last the palace noticed. Retired Emperor Go-Toba, the most powerful patron of poetry in the land, admired his verses. In 1201, he appointed Chomei to the Imperial Poetry Bureau, an extraordinary honor for a man of his rank. 10 of his poems entered the Great Imperial Anthology. At nearly 50, the shrine priest's forgotten son had become one of the celebrated poets of Japan. Then came the moment everything turned on. In 1204, the priesthood of the Kawai Shrine fell vacant, a post within his family's own domain, the one position that would finally restore what his father's death had taken. The retired emperor himself backed Chomei for it, and his own clan blocked him. A relative wanted the post for his son, and won. The emperor, embarrassed, offered Chomei a consolation prize. Chomei refused it. He walked out of the capital, shaved his head, and became a monk. 60 years earlier, the samurai Saigyo had walked away from the palace guard toward the open road. Chomei walked away toward something smaller, a hut. He built his final home in the hills of Hino, southeast of the capital, 10 feet square, 7 feet high. 1 room. And here is the detail that tells you everything about the age he lived through. The hut was built to be taken apart, hooks and joints instead of nails, so the whole house could be loaded onto 2 carts and moved. Chomei had watched fires, storms, and governments destroy every great building in Kyoto. So he built a house the world could not take away, because he could carry it. Inside, an image of the Buddha, a few scrolls of scripture and poetry, a folding koto, a jointed biwa, a brazier, a window. That was all, and he was, by his own account, happier than he had ever been in the capital. In 1211, he even traveled east to Kamakura, where the young shogun Sanetomo, a swordless ruler who loved poetry more than power, received the old monk again and again, just to talk about verses. And the next spring, back in his hut, Chomei ground his ink and wrote the sentence, "Japan has never forgotten." The river flows on without end, and yet the water is never the same. He called the little book Hojoki, Record of the 10-foot square hut. Kamo no Chomei died in that hut in 1216, past 60 years old. The mighty of his age, the emperors, the warlords, the great families, built palaces, and the palaces burned. Their names fill textbooks now, memorized and forgotten. But the little book from the 10-foot hut refused to die. For 800 years, Japanese schoolchildren have learned its opening lines by heart: the river that flows forever, the water that is never the same. And the modern world keeps rediscovering him. More than 6 centuries before Thoreau built his cabin at Walden Pond, Chomei had already written that book, The Experiment in Living Small, tested against fires, famines, and earthquakes, and passed. Today we call it minimalism, tiny houses, downsizing. Chomei never called it anything. He had simply watched everything large fall down and noticed what survived: the small, the light, the portable, the honest. At the end of his book, he even turned on himself. "Have I renounced the world," he asked, "or do I just love my hut the way rich men love their mansions?" He gave no answer, only the quiet of the mountain and the moon. If you enjoyed this forgotten story, subscribe. There are many more to tell. Next time, the loyal bureaucrat who lost Japan's greatest battle, Sekigahara, and paid with his life. The real story of Ishida Mitsunari.